By the time that I discovered forms of somatic therapy, I also realized that just talk therapy might be touching only literally 20%. Reason being that talk therapy requires cognition, conscious processing. So we have the same brain that is causing this tension, processing this tension, and then putting this tension into words and communicating it. So it's like we are asking from the company that is being audited to audit itself and then produce the report of itself. The example you gave about venting is very spot on, and I noticed that particularly in men. Of course, that's not only a male thing, but men tend to be, at least in my practice, hypercognitive. Even if they speak about their feelings, you notice sometimes that the way they're speaking about them is so polished, so perfect, that something doesn't make sense entirely. It's like an extremely tidy way of speaking about feelings, and you notice this intellectualization when they self-analyze, and they do that in a very eloquent way. And lots of junior therapists tend to believe that. They don't get it, and especially if you have to do with a highly intelligent client, it's quite easy to be fooled by that. Another thing that happens pretty frequently, at least in my practice, which is a school for me, that's why I mention it all the time, is you might have a client that wants to please you. So you have reached some level of therapeutic alliance, and there is some transference, which makes some clients say the thing they think you want to hear. So there is ultimately a lot of recycling of the same patterns just being projected into the coach or the therapist. And I mention that because I want to reinforce your point that just talk therapy sometimes can even mislead the conversation. It's not only a 20% of the job, but it can also be misleading. I'm a big supporter of more holistic approaches. One of them is somatics, and especially what I'm focusing at is somatic shaking, which is very relevant to what you said, but also trauma approaches like EMDR, which pretty much work in the same way as somatics. I'm not yet finished with EMDR, but I have done EMDR and I'm studying it, still not certified. But what does EMDR do? It tries to reconcile memories, reconcile all the bits of a memory. You are keeping one part of the memory, the conscious part, and you are intellectualizing. But then there are other parts of that memory that are being scattered across your brain. Maybe a smell is part of the memory. Maybe the sensation of the body is part of another memory. So it tries to reconcile all that so that you relive it, you remember it, and you desensitize it, what we call in psychology desensitization, which is the mother of getting over trauma. The way to get over trauma or a fear is to experience it and desensitize from it. So this is what the EMDR does. And this is what somatic therapy does, ultimately. And I'm pretty sure that while I'm talking, you might find a lot of parallels with psychedelics therapy because the principles are the same. I want you to tell me about that. What in somatic shaking and somatic therapy through shaking and tremor? We ultimately try to remember and get conscious of states that are being linked with somatic tension. And for me, that was a breakthrough in therapy and coaching, because I might be talking with someone for quite some time, but then we have a session of somatic tremor, and not even talking about the relief, because the nervous system literally releases tension. But mostly the value comes from what you mentioned about resistance in the body. So in lots of cases, when someone starts tremoring, they might relieve feelings of panic or tension. And of course, there are techniques to understand where is the tension and ease it a little bit. But when you release from one part of the body, typically what happens is another part of your body gets tense.
Mhm.
And this is exactly what you mentioned, the resistance. You are afraid to go there. And typically what we do and what we advise is that you shouldn't push it. And a lot of people, both cognitively, but also in somatic shaking, I guess also in psychedelic therapy, they get into this process with expectations. But when you get into somatic therapy with expectations, you're putting ego in the process. And ultimately, you're pushing the body to release something that is not ready to release.
Yep.
So you are both one, but also two. It's like it is your body, it is your subconscious, it is your memory, but in the same time, there is something involuntary in this whole thing. Because you have involuntary shaking, but it's also sort of voluntary. Like the body is guiding you hand by hand towards what it's ready to do and what is not ready to do. At least that's my experience with
Mhm.
myself and clients.